Welcome to the Dream Journal. From the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, the Dream Journal is a weekly show where we explore the healing powers of nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with you.
So there's now those vital minutes, time is keenly found. We are not alone, water over stormy.
In the words of Carl Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Paying attention to dreams can change your life. So can psychedelic experiences. We'll be talking with Dr. Darren Jakubec, who is a family doctor and an anesthesiologist and a dream coach. He runs both ketamine and pain clinics and has lots to say about bringing revelations into everyday life. I am your host, Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. The Dream Journal is also a weekly podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review. You can find the archives at ksqd.org/the-dream-journal. But most importantly, tell your friends. My mission on this show is to get people talking about dreams, and one way to do that is to tell them, you're listening to this podcast all about dreams. Are you interested in dreams? Let's get talking about dreams. It's so valuable. Okay, so I am mulling over some recent dreams. I had my New Year's dream. There is a custom in Japan, I believe it's called Hatsumori, which is the very first dream that you remember of the new year is a particularly important dream and has some message or some portent for you. So, my first dream of the year that I remembered happened to be January 2nd, and let's hope it's not a total portent. It's not a disaster, but it was just this image of watching this man run to the end of a bungee cord and be jerked backwards. Wow, what is that? Is there something there about running to the end of my bungee cord and that springiness and working, being jerked backwards? Gosh, I hope I can figure out what's going on here and not spend too much time flying through the air on the end of a bungee cord. Tell you, that doesn't sound like much fun. But you might look through your journal and see what your first dream of the new year was and see if there's anything of interest to you. I tell you, though, this feeling has been with me for quite a few times since I had that dream. So I guess the dream is just telling me what's really happening for me. All right, so our guest will be Dr. Darren Jakubec. He has a Bachelor of Science and a medical doctorate. He has been trained in family medicine and anesthesia at 4 different universities in Canada and lives and practices in northern British Columbia. Darren has hosted, attended, or facilitated at least 12 DreamWork retreats and has also done personal inner work for most of his life. Darren has had DreamWork clients for over 10 years and practices DreamWork in his pain clinic, in his ketamine clinic, in the emergency room, and in the hallways and rooms of the hospital where he works. All right, well, we're getting Darren on the air. I can talk a little bit about dreams and psychedelics because there is something about the two of them that seems to touch into the same part of the brain. They definitely help us with evolution. And certainly we all dream. Dreaming is something that, I have one of my mentors, Bill St. Cyr, calls dreaming, he calls it microdosing the dream, that the dreams are like little bit of psychedelic experiences that happen to us every night. And of course, there's no after effects, there's no hangovers, you don't say rude things to your friends. So it is something that's really without consequence, and it happens naturally. The dreaming is like a natural evolution. Well, good morning, Darren. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, well, here we are. Excellent. So I'm so glad to get you on the show. Darren has been on the show. It's been 2.5 years now. So you were one of my very early guests. And it seemed like it was just about time to have you back. And here you are. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about what dreams have meant to you. I know you're also a dream worker and a medical doctor and, in pain clinic and a ketamine clinic and working in an emergency room. And that, yet dreams have been incredibly important to you on the personal level. And let's start with that. Like, what have you found about dreams on the personal level that has been helpful?
Thank you, Catherine. On a personal level, I often summarize to say they've saved my life and saved my marriage. They've been a rope to hang on to as I descend into myself and have a better life. And yes, as opposed to traditional therapy or other forms of self-exploration, I've always had dreams, and they have sorted me out in such a way that my life is so much better over the past 10 to 15 years than it had ever been. And I feel like I've resolved so many issues, and they've shown me how I've been in my own way, and I can follow my passions and be a better person, a better husband, a better father, and have a more fulfilling life.
Wow.
There's the summary. I could go on. But
well, how about some examples? I mean, those are huge statements. That's really, it's really transformative. Can you give some examples of how dreams have helped you and on the personal level, maybe with some specific dreams, but like what have they changed about you and how?
I mean, just by comparison, I had a bit of a rough childhood, and I'd been in regular therapy and art therapy, and I'd always make little incremental change, but it wasn't until I worked with dreams and dream images and had a therapist and went to retreats that I seemed to make such rapid headway and insights. And, one summary dream comes to mind. There's all sorts of overarching dreams, but this one comes to mind. There's one where I'm in a hallway. It feels like a hotel, and there's multiple doors, but there's a door on the left and a door on the right. And I open the door on the right, and there's angels singing, and it's very ethereal and heavenly. And I close the door, and I get this warm feeling, and I open the door on the left. And there's my father's fist coming to punch me in the face. And I see my sister on the couch in behind, and I close that door. And working with that dream with a facilitator, the facilitator very appropriately said, well, so which door do you want? So, well, of course I want the angel door. Right. Well, the way to that door is through the other door.
Oh, no.
They said it in a kind way, so it's not to push me through the door, so to speak, but in a way, I think I agree with the phrase that if you're sent the dream, you were ready for it on some level. Like, I did know that, but I didn't know quite how to proceed. But that there can be a very profound, positive place if you go into the painful places, that there's a reward. It's not just like talking to people as I am a medical doctor, and I do have a therapy practice and a pain practice. You can, if somebody's been abused or something, somebody knows they've got a traumatic past. Oftentimes traditional therapy will not offer the angel room. Like, you'd say, like, oh my God, how many times do I need to talk about that trauma, that rape, that beating, that whatever? But the dream, it gave me an incentive. Like, why would I want to talk about that with people will say with a traditional therapist, and they don't even know, and I can't blame them. And the words re-traumatize come up. But if I have an image of the angels and whatever that means, it gave me something to move forward with in a way that traditional therapy didn't.
Right. So at least it's not all about reliving the trauma, that there is also a a goal. There is some hope ahead. There is some blessing on
Yeah.
the way. Yes.
Yeah. So I like that dream as a bit brutal example, but a summary example of how dreams can be different. And somebody can say, oh, this will be worthwhile, excuse me, for you to go through your trauma. And the words seem shallow, but if the dream came from me and the image came from me, it's just a lot more powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and as you say, the dreams come from the dreamer, that they're not something that are imposed from outside. Like you could go through different meditations or of that somebody else created, but it's not from you. And yet you do have somebody telling you about the dream. Like I think that's pretty intense to say that the way to the angel door is through the door of the trauma. That's something that somebody said, and you could have also met somebody who said, "Oh no, ignore the trauma. Let's go right to the angel."
Right.
And so that would have been a whole different experience, which might have been valuable too, but it might have been quite different. So it doesn't matter the way we approach our dreams and who we listen to around our dreams, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you determined to go forward? And the dreams have often given me an olive branch or something to look forward to.
Yes.
Inner world, and it's often played out in the outer world, to use that language, which I do quite like and I find helpful. You can use whatever language you want, but whatever's going on inside of me or the dreamer, I tend to call inner world, and a lot of people don't use that language, but I think it's helpful. So when I find something helpful in my inner world, I'd often find something helpful in my outer world. And there's crossover.
So like, how do you then bring some of these inner revelations into the outer world? Because it's all very well to say, well, we're going to need to deal with this issue, but how do we actually bring the inner revelations into the outer world? Because that's true about dreaming, and it's also true about psychedelics, which is something that you also have been exploring extensively with clients and have found to be helpful. But you know, in my experience with psychedelics, the revelation sometimes you can come back to regular reality and you're like, what does that mean? Does that even make sense? Like, how do you bring those revelations? Or maybe it kind of gets siloed off into a little part of myself that I don't look at very often. So how do you incorporate those inner revelations into the outer world? Or do we want to? Is that something that's a goal?
Yeah, multiple answers, but I'll say, how do I do? I think it's not for me to know what's right for another person, but at the same time, the way to do that, in my experience, is through community and through support and through good therapy or good facilitators and support groups and engaging with others, because it's really tough to do it on your own. You can do it, and the brilliant things about dreams is they'll often bring specific examples. There'll be little points in the dream. There'll be a piece of broccoli in a dream. It's like, well, actually, are you eating reasonably well? Might be one of the questions. It's like, maybe I'm not, like, it'll be a little sidebar in a dream like that, and you'll be like, what the heck's the broccoli doing? It's like, so dreams often offer clues that will open questions that will help facilitate a good therapist. A good therapist is a good therapist, but if you don't bring some of these things into your outer life, I think the opportunity is missed to live a more fulfilling life or to take the message forward that the dreams want for us. And I say that cautiously, because I've been a doctor, a medical doctor, for 25-ish years, and doing emergency medicine for that long, and my pain clinic about 15 years, and counseling quite a while. How it's not like the phrase that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I can tell somebody to quit smoking. I can tell somebody to look into their issues, but I can't. It's not for me to make them want to change their outer life. Somebody has to want to do that. But if they don't change that outer life, oftentimes the patterns stay the same.
Right.
So I try and do it both in my dream work practice and in my psychedelic assisted therapy subtype ketamine practice, which I call it. You can go subtype psilocybin or subtype whatever, but ketamine happens to be legal in Canada and I can use it in the hospital. it's important to, in the Michael Pollan's words, to have the right mind set, create the right setting, and then support people afterwards so that they can help process and ask some of these questions. And it's really helpful to be in a group, if possible, to see how others have done it, how
Right.
others have just agoraphobia. Say people are confined to the house or rarely leave the house, which is a pretty common one. How have other people left the house? How have other people, to hear other examples? Because the dreams can keep prompting you, or a therapist or meditation can keep prompting you. But if you don't take those steps, so one of the better ways I found is regular follow-up and group meetings with other people to try to spur you to get ideas on how to change. And
And to see how other people are changing too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you see in the media every now and then, and the people who are scared of psychedelics and scared of inner journeys, that that left-handed door where the fist comes. I mean, there's a lot of dark things. If you go to those dark places without support, it's no wonder some people commit suicide, or people can feel very depressed, or the fears of the regulating bodies around these substances are legitimate. If we just give these things out or license them without the support necessary, and regardless, some people are going to commit suicide or go to very dark places and be hard to get out of them no matter what we do. So I'm trying to be practical. How can we help others open one door to find the other door? It's tough because and people won't always accept the support. So choosing the people wisely who want to go there, not pushing people to go to that dark place, and then supporting them if they choose to go there in as many ways possible.
Right.
Am I making sense, Catherine?
Yeah, and I get one of the reasons I'm just really flashing on the whole thing of communities and sharing this work with others, and it happens in a structured settings like group therapy and even dream groups, which are structured, but also I think friends, and like seeing friends go through revelations, like maybe seeing a friend go through that dark door and yet finding that they have their way through into these transformation that can give you courage to go through your own dark doors. And so just the support, and that's, as I said at the top of the hour, this is one of the missions of my radio show, is to get people talking to each other about dreams because of the power of community and sharing what is happening. Because if it happens inside your own head, you don't know if anyone else is going through that. You might just look at everyone else's smiling face and go, oh, nobody else is having trouble. It must be me. And that can lead to a very helpless kind of a place. And so sharing is very, very key to coming through some of these difficult places. And it's interesting that you talk about that in connection with psychedelics, and that it's kind of an inner journey, especially the way that we see that psychedelics is being practiced lately in the clinical setting. With eye shades on and music playing in the background and on bed with totally inner journey, very, very much individual. And yet you're saying that follow-up is very important to bring that person into community to really help them integrate that experience. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's my bias and my experience in terms of minimizing the re-traumatizing or the dark places that people can go to and not come out of. And even just as a small detail, I don't make people put on make people is a strong word, but put on the eye shades or the ear things. I do encourage them to close their eyes, because if people have choice and offer them the eye shades, something about choice I find really powerful. And most people will close their eyes over time, but sometimes it takes a few sessions for them to get there and to trust. And once they trust, then they can close their eyes and go to that place where they can have whatever's inside of them speak to them and help them on their own healing journey. But absolutely, the community or being with others is so helpful. And as a metaphor, and I don't know if it's true or not, I often tell people the hardest dreams to work with are the ones where you're alone. The scariest ones are the ones where you're alone,
Yeah.
the inner world and outer world. So and one of the questions, if somebody's dealing with something very dark alone, I'll say, well, where was your father? Where was your mother? Where is your partner? Where's your support team? And it often leads to an epiphany in the outer world. Well, they haven't built a support team, or they're not utilizing their support team.
Or they don't even know what that looks like because they grew up without support.
Right. Right. So what's not happening in the dream, I find significant. And people don't, we live in a society that depends. I mean, I shouldn't say this as a general rule, but many of us live in homes that are separated from community, and things that should be happening in community often aren't happening in a way to connect people. And we could be doing far better, in my opinion, in Western society at least.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of different ways that you work with community. I mean, you live in a small northern British Columbia community, pretty separated. As I understand, there's like no road out for your area. And
there is. So yeah, and that's in Canada, by the way, for those.
Yes.
With a funny provincial name. But there is a road out, but it's we're 14, somewhere between 12 and 16 hours away drive just to get to Vancouver, and that's good weather. But I live in a relatively small place, but it's an eclectic community of like 5,000 catchment area, about 30,000 perhaps, and there's towns along the highway, and there's motivated people everywhere, and people that I offer a pain clinic that captures people from all along this northern highway, and I work with a physiotherapist, and one of the ways I've incorporated dreams, if you're okay with me going on this tangent.
Yeah, please.
Excuse me. Is that people will come in with chronic pain, and chronic pain is a very difficult thing to treat just up front as a practitioner unless somebody's done a lot of work in this category, because the pain is real and the focus is often on the pain. And some of the more successful programs talk about how do you change your neural circuitry so that everything isn't going along the circuits of just saying pain. But dreams are one thing. So one, I'm in community with a physiotherapist who's addressing the physical, and I'll often say to people, okay, pain is multifactorial, and regardless, I've no doubt the pain is there, but you can turn down the volume on pain by decreasing the stress in your life, be it nutritional stress, and what are you eating, toxin stress, what sort of toxins are you putting into your body, and psychological stress, physical stress, all the physiotherapist will help you deal with. And I'll say, so how was your childhood? Everything good? No luggage from the past? Parents that loved you? Hugs? All was good in your childhood? And people almost always say yes. And then within 2 minutes, they'll tell me a story of something horrific from their childhood. Is very often what happens. But if they don't, I'll say, so any dreams? I'm a doctor that works with dreams sometimes, and do you have any dreams you're willing to tell me? And I speak of it in an upbeat tone, and I give injections and needles and steroids, and I rarely prescribe anything. But people will share their dreams with me. And here's an example of somebody who I'd seen, a relatively young woman with children that was coming in with back pain. And I'd opened up the door to say, look, pain is multifactorial. This one needle isn't going to take it away, or it might work short term, but the pain, there's often an emotional aspect to pain and other aspects. And she opened up with a dream, and she says, yeah, I've got I forget what age, but perhaps 6-year-old daughter in the bathtub, and I'm bathing my daughter. And my husband comes in and pees in the bathtub. And then she just kind of stopped. And she stopped talking. And I kept doing what I was doing, and I tried to give her some space to just be with what she had said. And I didn't analyze that dream. I didn't do anything. I just waited for her to say something. And when she left, she said, I things are going to have to be different in my house, she said.
Wow. So just by speaking the dream out loud in a space where you could just give her space, she recognized some things were not right.
Right. And in the ideal world, I'd have a program for her to go into and a team of counselors or a dream work. But the resources are pretty thin in many places in healthcare, including where I am. And the people that do this sort of work are pretty slim. So I'd be willing to follow up with her. But it's a good example of how I could tell her that she needs to look multifactorially and at all the parts of her life to try and decrease her pain and give herself a better life. But she figured it out herself. To some extent, and that's a small example.
Right, but I see the counselor there. You don't even have to know what it was that she was thinking. What needs to change. You don't even need to know that the dream just speaks for itself. And she knows what it means.
Yes, I could. There's 1,000 questions I would have liked to have asked, but I don't want to. I just kind of read her emotions in the room and felt she wasn't in the place to be asked. Oftentimes I'll say, is it okay if I ask a question? And I might have asked, are things okay with you and your husband? But it didn't feel right at the time. But if she would have signed up for a dream work appointment with me, I would have certainly asked that question. Every now and then somebody says, can I see you privately about this? Or can you? And then we'll meet separately. And it's a way that in my regular medical practice, I can change things. Can I give you another example?
Sure.
There's a person, we're late at night in the emergency room, and this person comes in with back pain, and she's mid-20s, in with a partner, and I look back in the chart, in the electronic chart, I see this person's been at other hospitals and pain has been an issue, and I don't know, it could be kidney, could be, there's all sorts of things, abdominal and back pain can be. And I think just seeing, I've never met her before, I gave her my spiel that pain is multifactorial, and certainly we will look into the medical things and we'll check this and maybe do a lab test here and do this, but is there any stress in your life? And I just kind of left it at that, and then I went back in, we did some tests, and I couldn't figure her out, and I saw some other patients in the emergency room, and I went back, and I said, do you have any dreams? And I'm running a busy emergency room here. There's not much time.
Right.
But I know sometimes this can switch, as opposed to her going to the next hospital down the road, looking for another relief for her pain or more investigations. She says, yeah, I have this recurrent dream, and she asked her partner to step out.
Oh.
And she says, yeah, there's one dream where she's doing something, I forget the details, but her father is walking away. And that's the end of the dream. And I just asked her questions. What's the relationship between her and her father? She loves her father, and he's a great guy, and da-da-da-da-da, and everything seemed fine. I says, so is there a distance between you two? And she got teary-eyed, and I said, well, why is there a distance? Did you make a distance? Is there? And she says, yeah, ever since 2 of my father's friends raped me, it's like I did not see this coming. Wow. And she said, I know if I told my father, he'd be in jail because he'd killed him.
Wow.
And I don't want my father to go to jail, so I haven't told him.
Wow.
And I just kind of, the air went out of the room, and I just, like, what does one say, right? I just try and be supportive and give space. And then she came to the conclusion on her own. She says, do you think I should talk to my father? And I let her, like, I don't give absolute answers, but I said, that's certainly a consideration. And talking to a counselor about this and just saying, this is a big thing. Have you told anybody other than me? And she hadn't.
Oh, wow.
And we know that emotional pain can lead to physical pain, and this is a big thing to open up at 3 a.m. in a busy emergency room. But she called her partner back in, and I said, we talked about seeing a counselor, and she was amazingly amenable to it. She says, yeah, I think I should see a counselor. And it gave another option or another way to go other than narcotics. And God knows there's a fentanyl crisis out there and
Yes,
people
there
looking
is.
for pain relief. And
Yeah.
but I believe she was likely on this track. And until something opened this door, and dreams are one modality that very quickly can open a door and open up a dialogue to something different. And I don't know where that all went. The bad thing about the emergency room is you don't often get specific follow-ups.
Right.
But I know that person left without requesting any narcotics. And that was a win in my department. And I can't help but think back to my dream. If people are willing to feel supported and go through those painful doors, there'll be a better life at the end for them in some way, because a lot of people just go to dark places and sabotage themselves with dark things like drugs, which I'm pretty tainted. I see in the emergency department all the time, and I have to get away from the hospital sometimes just to ground myself, to think, okay, not everybody is depressed and on narcotics. And yeah, it can be a bit of a depressing job. Rewarding, but very depressing at times too.
Well, I'm very grateful for the work that you do, Jake. It is amazing, and to bring so much heart and soul to it. So this is Darren Jakubec, Dr. Darren Jakubec, who in British Columbia. Okay, this is the Dream Journal. My name is Catherine Bell. Our guest today is Dr. Darren Jakubec, and we are talking about dreams and psychedelics and all kinds of things. So I'm wondering how this compares. You talked to a lot of these beautiful examples of how pain is tied in with emotional situation, emotional issues, and how dreams kind of address that. And I know that you also do the psychedelic work around ketamine, and I wonder if you could say a little bit about how ketamine helps people address these issues. Is it the same kind of a thing as dreaming, or are there? How do you see them as similar and different?
Yes, it's true. I work with a psychiatrist, and I'm a family doctor that does anesthetics and emergency room work, and have this passion as well. So I set up a ketamine infusion clinic for mood disorders, and the psychiatrist screens everybody, and that both gives me medical legitimacy, and it's good to have a second opinion to say, okay, the psychiatrist thinks this is a good idea and refers, and I think almost anybody could be helped. You don't necessarily need to see a psychiatrist, but it helps create a system and a link and a community, as mentioned, so that you're not doing one-offs. Like if somebody says they're going to go do a psilocybin or a whatever psychedelic trip, ketamine, what makes it different than having it in a controlled environment where there's counselors or support networks, and my support networks aren't as extensive as I would like them by a long shot. I find it very similar to dreams, because the ketamine can open you up to a dreamlike state, or any psychedelic, I imagine, to some extent. And not that it forces dreams upon you, but it forces imagery and feelings and different perspectives upon you. So I see a huge crossover. The language is largely the same that I can use, and to help people be with those often darker places, but sometimes lighter places and uplifting places. How can you stay with people and ground them, and not say, look, this is all the angel door, or this is all just the punch in the face door, and help balance it and help ground people when they come out of the experience. So I see a big similarity between working with dreams and working with psychedelics in that way. You can get into this disoriented, ungrounded state where your perspective is shifted, and the ability to know there is such a thing as an inner journey and an outer journey, and that there's connection, and there is such a place as darker places and lighter places, and speak grounded about that, and not that one is bad or one is good. I find this huge crossover between the two. And it's been a natural progression for me to go from dreams to psychedelics. So there's the big similarity. The big contrast or difference I find is the motivation that people come for psychedelics. And with the resources we have in Canada, it's a public system. There's little pockets of private systems here and there, but they're not so prevalent as in the States or other countries. And it's hard to access. And people will come wanting ketamine or wanting a quick fix. I've at its worst compared it to a safe injection site for narcotics or fentanyl or something for people addicted to opioids, that they just want a hit of something, want to be better, and leave, and not want to do any of the work around it. And so the downside of psychedelics, or one of the main differences and downsides, is the motivation of the people going to do these things. And sometimes the motivation isn't always sincere, and that they want to do self-reflective work. But the very nature of a psychedelic is it pushes its agenda, and you almost always get some sort of experience out of it. And I just hope people make the best of those experiences. But for that reason alone, we rarely take people with just chronic pain unless they can admit a mood disorder, or there's something more than pain in their life, because I find it rarely works for just pain unless there's a self-reflective component,
some kind of emotional aspect there.
Correct. Acknowledging and addressing the emotion, hence even involving the psychiatrist. And I ask everyone, are you seeing a counselor? You can't be in this program unless you have some version of a counselor.
I love that.
Someone to talk to afterwards. So you're not just going to come in, get a hit, and leave, because I find I'm not doing you a favor, and perhaps I'm even doing you harm, in that you might go to a dark place. I don't tell them this, but you might go to a dark place and not be able to come back so easily. So I'm okay. I don't want to tell other people how to do this, but I'm certainly reluctant to do this without offering people the proper supports in and around.
Fair. I think that's fair. So, Jake, we have a caller on the line. We have Marlena from Santa Cruz, who is calling in. Are you there, Marlena? Can you hear us?
Hi. Yeah, hi, Catherine. It's me, Marlena.
Oh, good. Hey, thanks for calling in. Good to have you on the show. What do you have to share? What's been up for you?
Well, a couple of things. First, I did have that one dream, not a dream, on the New Year's Day, the first day of January. I just had the word riparian repeated over and over and over again in a dream. So that was interesting. But then I also was wondering about that dream that you and I worked about, my blue house unfolding, and those creatures that didn't, or beings that didn't speak, but were sending me unspoken messages.
Yes. So do you want to share the dream with Darren, and we can explore it a little more? What would be helpful for you, Marlena?
Yeah, I think maybe I could do that.
Okay. Wonderful.
My blue house unfolded is the name of the dream.
Well, you can always share as much as you remember of it, which is kind of interesting. Sometimes dreams kind of percolate, and then what I remember them maybe even different than what I wrote down, but there's somehow that's still valuable, I feel.
Well, and the other thing is, maybe this one might be more interesting. But you remember the dream I had about the papaya? Do you remember? Maybe you and I remember the dream. It was kind of a crazy dream where I said my vagina was removed, but it resembled a papaya.
A papaya, yes.
A papaya. Well, so I realized the other day that actually resembles mitochondria, and I have this fascination with the idea that the females receive the mitochondria DNA from is passed down female to female in the families, and I realized I think that's what that dream was really all about. And and it came in the form of a papaya. Just as I looked at the image, and then I saw mitochondria, it's like, okay, this is really what this dream is about. Because I have this fascination with trying to replicate it into some kind of art piece. Because I've always been fascinated with this idea that, you know, I was in my mother, my daughters, and my grandmother. We're all kind of connected by that mitochondria.
Right, the matrilineal line is powerful.
Yeah, some reason that's a big deal to me, and the dream seemed kind of bizarre when I had it, but then I made that connection that it wasn't so much. It was the image of the sliced open papaya that really resembles a cross section of a mitochondria of a cell, a DNA cell with the mitochondria in it.
Yeah. So Darren, do you have any questions for Marlena about this dream, or I could jump in with a question, or do you have some thoughts?
Just one question. Hi.
Yeah, hi. Exactly.
What does riparian mean for you, and does that relate to your life at all?
The riparian didn't mean anything to me at all. I had to look it up when I woke up, and it just repeated over and over again. And so I wrote it down quickly and looked it up. So I don't know if it has something to do with the weather now. It was the foretelling of this rain. You know, that we're on the edge of these stormy rivers and stuff. It doesn't force. I don't know. That I was surprised that I've hanging on to that word.
Otherwise, can I ask one more question? Oftentimes we are the house in dreams. Not always, but often. Is there, what's happening to the house?
In my blue house unfolded, I was whooshed up and away into an orange, misty light. It wasn't sunset, it wasn't sunrise or sunset, and it was into a place with many beings. Their shapes were very indistinguishable. It was silent, but I could hear their thoughts, wordless thoughts, and I was wandering among them trying to hear their message, which I thought I needed to hear it in words, and I didn't think I understood, but actually I did. I didn't need to be confused. I just need to be silent and accepting as I continued to glide among them. None of us touching the ground. We were just in this golden, misty glow. No faces. Shapes were cloaked in like long hooded capes. And we were barely visible, just kind of huddled as if one, not moving in any direction, just kind of hovering. And they guided me to return. And I didn't believe a message was given to me, but it was a precious message. And it was like, could I accept its truth? So then I was back in my bed, my blue house folded and closed to the beautiful glow, and everything was in its place. And it took me, when I woke up, a long time to move again or open my eyes, but then, because I wasn't sure I wanted to come back into this world, but then I felt like I could meet them in the silence, both here and there, and I could understand without confusion, without clarity, without wordless thought, or with wordless thought, with wordless thought. That was the dream.
So can I ask, what's the feeling, and where in your body do you feel that?
Well, it was a very beautiful, uplifting dream, and it was also it was peaceful, restful, to be in a place of not having to explain myself, just be accepted somehow as I am. I didn't have to.
Where in your body do you feel that? Can you feel that?
I suppose in my head and heart at the same time. It's like not having a body almost.
That's being in the beautiful golden glow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I often tell people the main meaning of the dream is usually the feeling. 100 meanings to a dream, but usually the feeling, and there's something healing in the body sometimes, of bringing a body awareness to it.
One of the phrases that you said, Marlena, that really stuck to me is not having to explain myself. And it feels like when I imagine not having to explain myself, it feels like a relief, because words can be very complicated.
Yeah.
And just to let in that sense of words aren't necessary. There's no explanations required. Just a moment.
It's hard to get them right, the right words, so the person understands what you really mean rather than being misunderstood.
Absolutely. Right. And yet with these golden beings, no need to explain myself. I can just be even kind of without a body, like this heart and head sense. And yet it's interesting you describe the heart and the head, and yet it's also bodiless. Sense of no body.
Great. And then bringing to the outer world is, and you don't have to answer this question, have you lived part of your life needing to explain yourself? And maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. And once again, you don't need to answer, but it's not a fun way to live.
Maybe I just feel like I don't speak up enough. That it's too hard to explain myself.
Well, just take a breath into that, Marlena, and recognize that maybe there's something true here. That maybe it's a relief to not have to explain myself, and yet at the same time, I kind of wish I could speak up more.
Yeah.
And I just, we have to finish up here, but okay. I just have one more thing, Marlena, and I'm glad you called.
Yeah.
It's just I ask, what is your association with the papaya?
I really don't know. When we sliced open, just by chance that my niece bought a papaya, we opened it up, and I really had never bought a papaya, opened one up before. We opened it up, and it's like, oh my God, this is what my dream was. And she is a medical student. She said, this is, so she pulls up the picture of the mitochondria, and it's like, oh my God, this is really what that dream was about.
Something foreign and unfamiliar, and yet here it is. I recognize it.
At first it was completely, it was bizarre, but it kept calling my attention, and then it kind of fell into place for me.
So are you opening up things from that maternal line is kind of a follow-up question I'd have. You don't need to answer once again.
I'm sort of honoring the maternal line in my family.
Well, thank you, Marlena. So good to have you call. It says I feel like I've had so many rich images here I have in my mind. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye now. This is Dr. Darren Jakubec, and I wonder, do you have any final thoughts to share with our listeners?
Yes, I suppose I've tried to just give a perspective on what it's like being in the front lines of the healthcare system using dreams and psychedelics, and goodness, keep searching. Keep opening doors. It's worthwhile, and have a support network. And much gratitude to you, Catherine, for keeping this program going and being one of my supports. Catherine is one of my supports. So thank you, Catherine.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jake. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So next week we will be speaking to Vicki Saunders, who is at the Inner Work Center in Virginia. We'll be talking about Carl Jung and his revolutionary views of dreaming, which 100 years later still profoundly shape our understanding of the human psyche. If you want to join the conversation live, tune in Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Pacific at the ksqd.org live stream. The podcast replay will be released on the Monday following the show. I am Catherine Bell, and this has been The Dream Journal. Thanks for listening. Find out more about my own dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. Email me at catherine@ksqd.org. That's KATHERINE@ksqd.org. The Dream Journal is produced at the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, California. Archives and 24/7 live stream at ksqd.org. Please subscribe, rate, and review. It does help people find the show. I'd like to thank my hardworking Rick Kleffel, engineer and music creator. You can find ambient music at pandemia.com. thank Tony Russimano, Eva Milady. The intro music is Water Over Stones. Outro music is Everything, both by Mood Science. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, take a minute to write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.
All the boys and the girls and everyone in the world knows that so much is wrong, but much more is right. We see in the darkness by shine.